Boom, da-ba-doom, boom, da-ba-doom.
Hey guys, Chris Peach here, and welcome to the Money Peach podcast. Hey, do you remember growing up learning how to handle money? Yeah, neither do I. So that's why we're here today, to make your money fun again. You know, we're going to talk about the principles in life that actually matter when it comes to managing your money in a way that works. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Money Peach podcast. Before we jump into another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast, I want to take a second to talk to you guys about my free budgeting form. You know, the first step to getting on any financial plan is to measure the money. And the only way to measure the money is if you are living on a monthly budget. So after this episode, head on over to moneypeach.com and please download my free budgeting form. There's thousands of people now all over the world who are taking back control of their money using this same form each and every month. The number one habit of highly successful people is they're proactive. So be proactive with your money and get yourself on a budget. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. I'm Chris Peach. This is episode 45. Now, I am super excited to bring you the guest on the show today. It's Toni Anderson. So Toni, I met about 2 years ago at a conference. She's been extremely supportive and helpful in my own business. So she's very, very successful herself. Now, she started a blog back in 2008 that's now a six-figure blog year in and year out. So in addition to that, she also has a conference that's a lot of online marketers and bloggers from around the country that meet together once a year that she hosts. Then in addition to that, she also does consulting on the side. Then in addition to that, she also has an e-commerce store where last year she did over $100,000 in a single month. Oh, and by the way, she's a mother to 7 kids that she's homeschooled, all 7. So yeah, she's pretty impressive to say the least. So without further ado, let me bring on my guest, Toni Anderson. Alrighty, Toni, thank you so much for coming on the Money Peach podcast. I have actually been wanting to get you on the show for a while, and I've kind of been intimidated to ask you because you're Toni Anderson. And so there's a story behind that. When I first met you, I said something really stupid when I first met you, and I still regret it to this day. But anyway, we'll talk about that here in a second. But I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on the show, and welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. It's fun.
So you are located where?
I am in Florida.
Okay, very cool. And I'm here in Phoenix. So I met you in 2015. I was a brand new blogger, and I went to this conference. I believe it was in Charlotte at the time. I think it was. Yes, It was in Charlotte. And I remember the first night there, there's a bunch of people, flying in. We're all meeting at this bar. I don't know anybody. And so you look very, very young. You look the same age as me. And somebody says, "Did you know that Toni over there is a grandmother?" And I'm like, "Oh." And so this is how my social skills work, is I just walked up to you and said, "I cannot believe you're a grandma." That's how I introduced myself to you. And I remember you looked at me like, "You're a jackass." You idiot. And I walked away. I'm like, wonder why I said that. So yeah, that's how I met you. And I don't understand how literally 2 years later, you decided to come on the podcast. So thank you for that. A lot to talk about today. Do you remember that, by the way?
I don't. And I want to clarify, I did not actually call you any names.
No, you did not. You gave me the look of, this guy is an idiot. Which that look, because now that I know you, I've seen you give that look quite often.
Yes, it is. It's one of my many, but obviously one of my favorites.
Yes.
But, yeah.
And then, and then the second time we got together was we, without knowing it, signed up for the same program. It was Marie Forleo's, was it B School?
Yes. Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yes. And then we flew to San Diego for a conference, little mini mastermind conference there with Amy Porterfield, which was great. So that was a fun time too. That's where I saw those looks a lot, like, "Are you kidding me?" looks. So in a good way. It was a good way, but it was just funny. I got to know you a little bit better there. And you've been a huge help in my own business. So that's why I wanted to come on the show to talk about some of the things that you've helped me with that we can maybe share that and help other people with as well. So I'm doing all the talking though, and I would really like you to be doing more of the talking. So I'm going to transition here. We're going to go to the 80-20 rule, where my wife says you talk 20% of the time and she talks 80% of the time. So let's go ahead and jump into you starting off as a blogger.
All right.
When did you start?
So I actually started blogging in 2006. My husband was deployed, and they had a lot of filters, so he couldn't get a lot of the email services. And I'm going to really date myself. You'll know now why I'm a grandma. They only had like AOL and Yahoo back in the day. I think maybe Hotmail was another one. And so whatever computer system they were on would filter out a lot of those email addresses. So it wasn't reliable to send emails to him. So I started a blog basically to just like a diary, like truly a blog, like back in the day when blogs were just you writing about your day. It was probably pretty boring to anybody that didn't know you. So I actually started in 2006 and just wrote a letter to him every day. And then one day I got an email from Oliver North's publicist. I had written a post, I think around the 4th of July, just talking about military service and how important it was to our family and how much I respected my husband for what he was doing. And I guess it got picked up by something, which I had no idea that anybody other than my mother and him were reading it. That was my first realization that a blog was more than just your personal diary that happened to be published on the internet. And fast forward to about 2 years later and realized that I was going to transition out of the basically family storytelling blog into a blog that was more of a resource site initially for military spouses who tend to live away from their family and friends and need like a next door neighbor that they don't actually have. So it's like a virtual next door neighbor.
Okay. So what was the name of your first blog then?
You know, what's crazy is I don't remember.
Because that's okay. Because I'm thinking back to 2006. I didn't know what a blog was.
And I want to say like it might have just been our family name. When I did it, I didn't think of it going out to anybody else. I really thought it was, and it wasn't even on like WordPress. It was on a blogging platform where you basically just wrote, right? And everything just showed up on a blog page. And I had no idea uploading images was like a huge deal when I figured out how to do that.
You had told me that when you were starting that blog, you were literally learning how to code like websites, right? There was no WordPress, there was no do-it-yourself, it was all do-it-yourself. It was all coding. And
which was why WordPress was really cool. When I found WordPress, I thought, oh, wow, they've actually made it easy for people to do this.
Wow. So that's 2006. So then transition then to 2008 when you started The Happy Housewife.
Yeah, so I started The Happy Housewife in 2008. And my husband, actually, when he came back from that deployment, was injured. And we thought he might be discharged from the military with no retirement and no disability. I had basically been out of the workforce. Well, let's be real. I'd never been in the workforce, but I had like no marketable skills in my mind because I have a degree in government and had never really worked in that field. So I just thought I could start a blog and somehow make money from it. Although I really didn't have any idea how you made money from a blog. I figured if I put my mind to it, I could probably figure it out. So I started it then. And it's interesting because I think back, since I'm still in the blogging world today, I think back about how it was back then. And there was, Facebook was not for bloggers. Twitter was, I think, no one was on Twitter. I mean, it was just very, very new. There was no Pinterest or Snapchat or Instagram. The only way you could drive traffic to your website was either to comment on other blogs or to do those linky parties. Do you know what those are? Because I know that they don't really exist anymore, or not. They're not as popular.
No, I've never heard of linky parties, but I remember commenting. I was told in the very beginning of my blog that you had to comment on everybody's blog. Yeah,
and it was a big deal, like on the big bloggers, to be like the first commenter. There were even tools that you could install where you would get an email when like a favorite blogger wrote a blog post that you could be the first commenter, because then you'd show up in the comments. So you basically spent all day like refreshing stuff to try to be first, because it would drive traffic to your website, which is ridiculous now that I think about it. But so that's basically how I got started. And what's cool about it is back then it wasn't really that spammy. You actually became friends with everybody that you were commenting and you were chatting in the comments with each other, because this was before Facebook really became that place to do that. So the people that I started blogging with in 2008, most of them I'm still friends with today. The people that I was good friends with back then, I have one blogger that I met very early on, and we talk once a week to this day.
And is she still blogging as well?
She's still blogging. Yep.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And I noticed that as well when I started in the blogging world. I'm a firefighter in 2015 is when I got started. And so I get started as a blog. And now, mind you, there's 1,600 people in my fire department, and not one person could tell you what a blog was. I couldn't. And so I'm on the blog, and I'm meeting these people in these comment section. And I remember going to this blogging conference where I met you, and I'm thinking, oh, wow, I guess I have like internet friends. This is kind of unique for a firefighter, like internet friends. So, and it's funny is now I'm actually really close with some of those friends where we actually talk the same thing about once a week. So I guess I did the same thing you did in that beginning part. I just didn't realize it until you said it. So The Happy Housewife then, how did you come up with that name?
I actually sat down at the computer when I decided to basically rebrand myself. I plugged in probably 150 names into GoDaddy. or I don't know, maybe it wasn't GoDaddy at the time, but one of the domain services. And that was probably number 151 and it was available. So when I first got married, I was probably the least happy and the least effective housewife that anyone had ever met. I burned everything from macaroni and cheese to pizza. I broke our VCR while ironing something. I had like zero domestic skills, just absolutely none. So it was almost tongue in cheek when I got started because I really was a terrible housewife and really miserable most of the time doing it for a very, very long time. Now, when I started the blog, I had gotten some skills, but definitely did not start out that way.
Fake it till you make it?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. So you have the happy housewife. It's funny you say you were at 151 names. When I got started too, they said, I was literally reading on how to start a blog online. It says, come up with a name. So I'm like, I want to talk about money with my blog. I want to try money.com. It was taken, right? And then I was going to, so I tried all these names and I'm like, I cannot believe there's all these names taken for these blogs. I mean, this is how naive I was. So Money Peach was probably, I would say it was in the top 20, but I had to go through at least 20. So, I mean, just naive. Like you said, in the very beginning, I had no idea, which I think is helpful when you're that naive because you're like a sponge. You're willing to learn so much because you literally know nothing.
Yes, absolutely.
I remember you had told me the story about, in the beginning, it was, I don't want to say it. Are we allowed to say mommy blog or is that not allowed?
I'll let you get away with it.
Okay, but so...
It's not the most offensive thing you've ever said to me.
No, apparently not. I usually save that for when we first meet, right. When I first meet somebody. So I love this story. How many kids do you have?
I have 7.
Okay, and they're homeschooled, correct?
Some of them are, yeah.
Okay, so you're homeschooling your children. Your husband is not in the house. He's overseas in the military.
Yep.
So when are you doing this blogging that you call it?
Anytime I could get a free second. So I basically, when I got started, I basically structured my day so that I could work or blog during nap time and then after the kids went to bed. So I would get up early. So I would get up before they got up. And my kids are not early risers. So people who are listening whose kids are up at 5:30 in the morning, that's not my kids. I have to wake them all up every day. So I would get up before them. I would blog a little bit in the morning, or I would go read comments, back then it was like responding to things like that. And then during nap time, my kids that were too old to have a nap, I would make them have quiet time and they could sit and read a book or, they didn't have iPads either. I'm a dinosaur. They could play on their little leapfrog pad, whatever we had back then. And then bedtime was 8:00 and at 8:01, I opened my computer and I worked until I'd fall into bed every night. For probably 2 years.
Okay, so that's interesting that you mentioned that. So for 2 years you're doing this, and a lot of this blogging you're doing it has images, you're cooking, you're making things to put on your blog.
Yeah.
So I mean, you were literally setting up cameras by yourself and filming yourself cooking and whatever else you were going to be blogging about.
Yeah, and it was funny because my kids got trained because initially when I started, I did a lot of recipes, and we still do some, but when I started blogging, if you didn't put up content 5 or 6 days a week, you just weren't going to make it in the blog world. I mean, the content creation was so much faster paced back then. And I'm glad that it slowed down because it's really way too much content for anyone to consume as a reader. Like a reader cannot consume 6 posts a week from anybody, even if they love what they're saying. And so my kids would be conditioned that when I'd put dinner on the table, no one would touch it because they thought I might have to photograph something before they ate. So they would all just sit there. So whenever we had guests over or anything, it would be hilarious because we'd put the food down and all my kids would sit there just absolutely stoic until I was like, no, I already got the picture. You're fine. And then they would all dig into their food. But they were trained to not touch or eat anything until they knew it had been photographed.
No, I love that your kids are part of this as too. For a couple of reasons is your kids are now watching mom, become an entrepreneur and grow her business, and they're part of it. I think that's unique. I think that's neat. I watched my parents. They're both entrepreneurs growing up. And I remember coming home from school, and if my mom had the headphones on, she was a travel agent, still is. So I knew I had to be really quiet, and I'd go get her something to eat and bring it in really quietly. And so I just remember being part of her journey as well. And now your kids are part of that. And then my kids, they're actually here right now with me because they're out of school, and they are being excellent. So we don't hear them right now because they're helping daddy grow his business as well. So very unique, very cool. So how much money, Toni, are you making in these first 2 years? Because I think this is important.
I should have looked this up because I think I posted it on Facebook. I was cleaning out my files maybe last year, and I found my very first check that I ever made from blogging, and it was $83 and like 11 cents or something. And it was from an ad network. And I want to say it was probably 9 to 10 months in blogging. So, at a year blogging, I was probably making a couple $100s a month. Nothing to justify the amount of time that I was spending for sure on the website. And definitely, I would have done much better to go get a job as a bartender, right? And worked probably less hours for way more money for at least the first year. The second year it picked up. I think by that time I'd gotten some loyal readers, and that's also when the ad networks started to really pick up. I think there was more competition in the ad network space. So you started being able to get on a better ad network. And then on top of that, things like affiliate marketing sort of transitioned out of the like weird, creepy guy in his mother's basement affiliate marketer to like everyday people talking about products they liked and linking to them with affiliate links.
Okay, so just for people that maybe don't quite understand, an ad network is, if you ever go to a blog or a website and you see like on the right-hand side, you'll start seeing ads pop up that are tailored actually to your traffic habits, your website habits. So like I could go on there and I'm going to see something totally different than maybe Toni does or whoever on that site for some ad networks. And some of them are obviously keyword specific. So, but those generate income for bloggers because if people go to the site and they click on stuff, it doesn't seem like a lot, but if you have thousands and thousands and thousands of people coming to your site, this is how you're generating income. So Toni, you're literally working a year to make a couple $100s a month when you could be, like you said, doing anything else to make more money.
Exactly. So I was home with my kids, and that's the thought of leaving my kids with a sitter or trying to get like regular childcare. I mean, and I'm sure you guys experience this because you're a dual working family. Trying to organize childcare and paying for childcare is ridiculous. And so for me, it was worth it, even because I felt like I was investing in the future growth of the business, but it was worth it because I knew that someday it was going to pay off, and I didn't want to sort of mortgage my kids' current life to get rich quick. Not that you're going to get rich quick as a bartender, but to make money now when I thought I could do it long term in a way that didn't really disrupt their lives too much.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love about when I started in the blogging world is, so one of the ways that I could generate income, I could do physical labor, I could go work overtime at work, but they all had to do with me being away from the home. And I thought, man, as a firefighter, I'm gone 24 hours at a time, and it's not fair to myself, my family, my kids that I'm going to be gone even more. So that's one of the things that really piqued my interest about doing a blog and then doing a podcast and doing online marketing is you can do it from anywhere. I mean, you go on vacation, you could do that there as well. I wouldn't recommend that, but you can. You can go anywhere. If the kids take a nap, you can work, and you work on your time. That's cool. So let's go a little bit further with this then. When did Happy Housewife then start really taking off?
It's interesting. Happy Housewife took off probably about a year and a half monetarily. Now, traffic-wise, it was growing. And of course, it was funny because back then you had the big milestone was 100,000 page views a month. So once you hit 100,000 page views a month, you made it, and didn't really have any tie-ins to money or email list or anything. It was just somehow that was this gold standard that you had, 6-figure page views, which looking back on it, I thought I'd rather have 5-figure page views and 6-figure income than, reversed. But back then that's how we measured success as a blogger. So, traffic has been growing, but I just was still learning how to leverage it for revenue. And probably about a year and a half in is when I got really involved in doing basically sponsored campaigns. So companies would pay me to either be like a brand ambassador. So I would actually travel to their headquarters and I would learn more about what they did. And then I would talk about it on the blog, or they would just send me products and things like that. And I would be paid to write about them. And that's when, that combined with the increased traffic and combined with affiliate networks is when things really started to take off and started generating like more income than I would have made at a part-time job.
Okay. So you said that was about 2 years into it?
About a year and a half to 2 years. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. So one thing I forgot to ask you, I want to go back on here is I know a lot of bloggers I've talked to, and I was wondering if you feel the same way, have had this happen to them. So you start something like you're doing this blog and you're working on it nonstop. You're staying up late at night when the kids are napping. And so you're not really generating any income. For me, I remember in the very beginning, I had, a bunch of friends and family who like me didn't know what the heck a blog was. They were like, what are you doing? I mean, what are you playing on the computer for all the time? Did you ever have that happen to you?
Oh, I still get it. So
But yeah. So yeah, you could say I still get it, but my bank account actually is pretty happy with me. But
Right.
I mean, what about when you were starting? How did you get? Because I know somebody listening to this right now has an idea for a blog or a brand or a website or an e-commerce store, and they have this idea, and they're almost too afraid to jump in or to take the next step because of this factor, this X factor of what is it going to be like when my friends say this or my family asks me why am I playing on the computer? Did you ever overcome? Or how did you overcome that then? And obviously now you just say, well, you look at my bank account, it's doing just fine from this blogging hobby I have.
One of the hard things about blogging is that if you or I were to go rent a office space and spend 6 months renovating it and then fill it with inventory and then put up our, for sales, grand opening sales sign, everyone would think we were doing something legitimate. But because people don't understand blogging, it adds to that, what the heck are you doing with your time sort of question. And what I always would tell people is that blogging is one of the very, very few jobs that I know that you can start with basically no money. You need a domain and hosting, right? So you can start a blog for $20 and you can do it on your own time, and you can do it even if you have little kids or if you have another job that you have to do. And basically you're not taking out a mortgage, you're not taking out a second mortgage or a loan to start a business. You're doing it for free. And the only thing you're sort of mortgaging is your time. And so to me, I would just explain to people that way. I could go start a brick and mortar business or a restaurant or whatever, and I could borrow $100,000 or $200,000 or who knows how much to start a business, or I can start this business, borrow nothing, and probably work the same amount as I would have had I leveraged, borrowed money to do it. And I'm probably going to end up at the same point eventually. So I explained it that way.
No, that's a great way to explain it. And you actually had said that to me, I think, when we sat down one time. You were helping me with something in my business, and you had kind of went over that same scenario. And so I actually use that exact same scenario you just said right there when somebody does ask me that same question, But so the second question I'm going to ask you is, okay, you started in 2006. And so I always say you were very proactive. I mean, this was people in the blogosphere, really, it was a small niche of people. It's not like it is today. So what would you say to somebody who is, they're driving in the car, they're listening to this, they're sitting on the train, they're listening to this, and they have this idea, they already have the domain name picked out in their head, but they're thinking this, they're saying, well, there's so many blogs out there already in this category or in this niche. I don't think I should start because there's already people doing this. It's saturated. What would you say to that?
Well, I'm probably not going to give you the right answer. It might be saturated. I think if you have an idea that you think makes it very unique, if you have a different perspective to bring to the table with a topic, that might already have a lot of websites out there, then I'd say go for it. But if you're just trying to be like the next Chip and Joanna Gaines, or if you're trying to be like the next Mr. Money Mustache, think of a different angle, right? So I would say go for it if you feel like you have something unique. But if you are just going to be a cookie cutter, then maybe rethink it for a little bit and try to find something because everybody is unique and everybody has a very different perspective on things. But I think what happens is people tend to copy successful people. And so at that point, you're going to be chasing something that you probably can't catch because they've had years to build up an audience and build up traffic and build up SEO and things that you don't have when you start out. So make sure that when you're starting, that you know that whatever your value proposition is truly a value proposition to your listener or your reader.
That actually is the answer I was looking for. I was hoping you weren't going to say, oh, just go ahead and do it, put your heart's desire to it and go for it. So I fell into this same exact trap myself. In the very, very beginning, when I started a personal finance blog, I didn't tell anybody ever that I was a firefighter. I was adamant. I didn't want anybody to know that I was a firefighter because I thought right away that if I tell somebody that I'm a firefighter, they're going to say, well, he didn't go to school to talk about money. He's not from the banking industry. He's not from the financial world. So why am I going to listen to this guy? And so the first probably 6 months, this was my mindset. And I forget what I was reading, but I was reading something and it says, what's going to give you the unfair advantage? Meaning, what is something that you have that no one else is doing? And I thought about it and I go, oh my goodness, there are no other firefighters out there talking about personal finance. I'm like, this is amazing. I have this opportunity here. And so I completely switched my mindset on that. And that was huge because about a month after that, I started noticing a lot of upticks on my page views. And I have a budget that I put on my website that I was downloaded. And a lot of those were, and so I started noticing this growth, and it was because I had this unfair advantage. And so I always tell people, if you're getting started, what is your unfair advantage? What's going to allow you to step outside of the box and be you? And I'll tell you what, when you're not trying to fake it, when you're just being you, and I'm the firefighter talking about money, it's so much easier than trying to pretend that I'm, from the banking world, which trust me, I am not.
Well, and I think it just makes you more relatable to people, to your audience, because I would say that there's probably people out there, and I don't know very many firefighters, but I know a couple. And, you guys have a pretty tough schedule. And so I could see people saying, I just don't think I can do XYZ because my schedule doesn't allow this or that. And you're there saying, hey, you can live this certain lifestyle. And I'm sort of walking you through it because I'm right there with you. And I think whatever your background is, it might not be firefighting, it might be something else. And you might want to talk about something else, but bring that to the table. And I think people will really, really relate with you much better than you just trying to pretend that you're some expert about something that you probably, you don't have the credentials, although who the heck needs them these days, in my opinion.
Yeah. When you go to your doctor's office before he treats you, you don't say, hey, would you mind going to show me your diploma? I want to know what school you went to. Right? I mean,
I actually do kind of want to know. Like, I asked one of my doctors what his GPA was, just to make sure he was paying attention in class. But outside of being a doctor, really, I don't care.
Are you serious? You really asked your doctor that?
Oh, totally. Because he was super young. And I thought, man, I don't think you're old enough to actually be a legitimate doctor. So I'm just going to start quizzing you. And he passed. So it's all good. We're friends now. But he overlooked my jerkiness initially.
And the fact that I know you, this doesn't surprise me even a little bit. I can just picture all of this. I love it. I think that's your unfair advantage. That's what makes you unique. And then the last thing I want to talk about before we transition away from Happy Housewife is last year we were sitting in a coffee shop. By the way, you don't drink coffee and you met me in a coffee shop. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
But you were showing me this post, and I don't know how long ago you wrote it. And you were like, this is what you were giving me the same spiel you just gave us a minute ago about how, opening up a brick and mortar store, and, you put this blog out there. So you put this blog out there, and I want to say it had something in there at the very bottom about ant killer.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you showed me some stuff, and I was like, oh my goodness. So share that story, because that stuck with me. And that was, 9 months ago, we were in that coffee shop. So what is that story?
I don't know what, I'm not sure there's a backstory to that.
No, the funny thing is you wrote a post about how to kill ants with like homemade stuff, like at home. And at the very bottom you wrote, if this doesn't work, here's some ant killer. And this post makes you, I don't know, not crazy amounts of money, but every single month, and this is years old, this post generates a good amount of income every single month. And it was a little blurb at the bottom about, here's some ant killer.
Well, because I think that, I think that's what, when people look, and if you're listening to this and you are a blogger, I think if you look back, you'll find that the posts where you're the most honest with your readers are the posts that will do the best for you. Because basically I wrote a post about, hey, because we had little kids and pets, and I'm like, I don't want to be putting poison all over my house. So I wrote this post about, here's how you can kill ants without, putting down massive amounts of chemicals. But at the end of the day, and it did work for us for a period of time, but then we eventually had these ants that were like, superhuman. And at the end of the day, we went and bought whatever I linked to on Amazon. I think it's some sort of borax killer, and they kill them. So the post was like, hey, this is a natural way. But at the end of the day, you really just want to get rid of the ants. Buy it off Amazon. And people love it because I think they try the natural way, because I still get emails about this all the time. It's crazy to me because it's like ants, and the people are emailing me. But apparently they're passionate about being bug free, and that's fine. But yeah, people like the honesty, people like the authenticity, and if you can make a little bit of money being honest, I say go for it.
People are wondering, okay, I don't understand the connection here. How does she make money? So she, through Amazon or whatever affiliate network you're with, you go there and you create a little link, and it's unique to you. So if somebody clicks that link and buys ant killer, but they went through that link, they know it's through your site and you get money for it. So that's how affiliate marketing works. I should have said that earlier, so this was a great time to mention that. Is that how you're set up with the ant killer?
Yep.
Very cool.
Hey there, do you ever feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck? Are you stressed at the end of every month and you're just praying you're going to make it through to next payday? Or are you tired of trying to figure out this whole money thing alone and you just simply want someone to point you in the right direction? Well, it's officially time to forgive yourself for any of the mistakes that you've made in the past, and it's time to learn a proven system that works, and that's Awesome Money Course. So don't forget to check out awesomemoneycourse.com, my #1 online program for taking you from with your money to showing you how to be awesome with your money. And that's awesomemoneycourse.com. awesomemoneycourse.com.
Okay, so 2 years into your happy housewife blogging, you decided, okay, I have 6 kids. I'm homeschooling them. My husband is overseas. I am full-time, mom, full-time school teacher, full-time happyhousewife.com. Let's take on one more project. So let's transition into Digi. What is Digi?
So Digi is a conference. It started out as a conference for bloggers, and it's really morphed into a conference for anybody who's looking to do online marketing. So you might not have per se like a standalone blog. Maybe you have an e-commerce store. Maybe you sell online courses. Maybe you do coaching or training, things like that. Or maybe you even have, like we had somebody that, has a physical like location, and they'll come to Digi because they want to work on their online marketing side of things. So while we started for bloggers, we've sort of morphed into more of, I think everybody needs to be well-versed in online marketing. So we're basically I would say a non-sleazy online marketing conference.
Yeah, so you're definitely non-sleazy. So last year, I totally missed out on getting in on the Digi, and so I wanted to go. So I remember I bugged you, just like I bugged you for this interview, and I said, "Hey, can I go to Digi? I know you don't have any more spots," and so you let me go. Thank you, and I was blown away. A lot of the conferences I go to are, I say the biggest value you get out of is networking. You go there and you meet people, you network. And I think that is unbelievably valuable, more valuable than I would have ever thought in the past, especially as somebody who's a firefighter. I'm very task level. And then all of a sudden I go here and I go to a conference, not your conference. I go to a different conference and I meet people and I'm like, this is great. I'm networking. But when I went to Digi, it was like in your face, step by step. Here's how to win. Here's how to succeed. And just a small story. One of your speakers last year comes up and starts telling us this strategy on Facebook, and it blew everybody's mind. And so somebody raised their hand and said, so how much are you spending a month on Facebook ads? And he goes, oh, right now we're about $10,000 a day. And I remember thinking to myself, where am I that someone is spending $10,000 a day on Facebook? I'm at Digi. That's what was cool. And obviously, if they're spending $10,000 a day, we know they're not losing $10,000 a day.
Right.
Very, very profitable. And that strategy that I learned from that 45-minute session has actually had a huge impact on my own business. So I remember reading one of your article or your blog posts somewhere, and it said that you had invested into a conference and you're a little bit nervous about going because you weren't making millions of dollars yet. And you go to this conference and you're like, I paid for itself in a day. And I can't, that is probably some huge takeaway. If you're going to hear anything from this episode today, go outside of your comfort zone, go fly somewhere, go to a conference, go meet people, go network, and go learn something. I'm telling you, it is a game changer. You can't do it alone.
Yeah. And that was the reason why we started it, is that the team that started it, we met at a blog conference. And I think it was the first time any of us had been to any sort of an event like that. We were very excited about the conference and excited to meet people that we had sort of been chatting via the comments for months. And the actual sessions were a huge disappointment because all of us were making some kind of money on our blogs, but nobody was talking about that in the sessions. They were talking about sort of high level, comment etiquette and things that to me seem to be a little bit like everyone knows not to be spammy, right? I mean, I think everyone doesn't know that, but I would think that people should know that. And we wanted an event where people actually talked about strategies to help you make money. And basically like, hey, can we make a college for bloggers is basically what we were thinking. So that's how we got started, is we really wanted an event where it was very practical, very hands-on. The people that were speaking were not just some, because a lot of times, and this is probably before your time, but blog conferences were filled with the most popular bloggers speaking, whether or not they were qualified. And so we basically said, hey, what if we don't even care if they're bloggers? What if they're just qualified? And maybe they're bloggers too, and that's great. But for the first couple of years, most of our speakers weren't even bloggers because we wanted the most qualified people to be speaking about things. And so that's why we did it. And we felt like it was time to take sort of the secrecy off of, because I think if you're a real estate agent, right, like you pretty much understand how you make money as a real estate agent, and you understand the tricks to making more money and closing more sales and getting better listings. Like that's all talked about very freely, but in the blog world, that wasn't talked about at all. So that was our goal, to sort of blow the secrecy off that and talk about it and get people together that all wanted to learn how to make more money in a very ethical and way that still stayed true to their brand and their blog and didn't upset their readers.
So one of the takeaways I would say that I received last year from going to Digi was it was this tight-knit community where everybody there wanted to help you, not compete with you. And I'm like, wow, that's very unique. You can't go many places anymore where people the competition was gone. It was, how can we help each other? How can we help you? What's going on in your business? And then obviously the uber qualified people you had speaking. I mean, just, it was over the top. So where could people find out more about Digi?
This year, we've actually partnered with Darren Rouse from ProBlogger. I think we just have an Eventbrite link right now, which I can give you for the show notes.
Okay.
I don't think we have a landing page set up outside of Eventbrite, so it's probably some weird URL, so I can send that to you. But we're basically doing the same event, but Darren has joined us. He's always wanted to do something in the States. He's from Australia. He lives there full time. So he's coming over. We have some, Pat Flynn's going to be one of our speakers. We're lining up more speakers this week, so it's going to be really exciting.
Darren from ProBlogger, that's one of the people that I was listening to his podcast and following his blog on how to start a blog. That's cool that he's going to be there. And then Pat Flynn's Smart Passive Income. When I first got started, those were probably my two biggest resources to get started, was listening to their podcasts and following their blogs and trying to figure out this whole blogging world through them. So that's unique. That's great they're going to be there. And that just goes back to you're bringing in extremely, extremely high qualified people to teach at this conference, which is, like you said, it's unique and different. You don't see that every day. Okay, so now, if you don't mind, I want to transfer into something that you're doing now, which I think is awesome, and it's your e-commerce.
Yep.
This is cool. I'm going to actually link in the show notes the blog post you have on mywifequitherjob.com.
Okay.
Because that is an unbelievable story. But I just want to talk about it. First of all, so many people might be listening. What is e-commerce?
So basically selling physical products in a digital space. So everything from selling on Amazon to selling on Etsy to selling on eBay to selling on your own website, but you're selling something that people actually get in the mail, a physical product.
Perfect. So clear that up. So what is your product that you're selling in your e-commerce store?
So I sell diffuser jewelry. So if you have any listeners that use essential oils, they're basically jewelry that you can put a little pad put a couple drops of oil in it, put it in the locket, or dab some oil on one of our bracelets, and then you have your oils with you all day long.
Okay, and how did you come up with this idea?
So I had wanted to move into the e-commerce space for a while and was just sort of doing some product research and trying to figure out what would be a good brand. And one of my neighbors came over and told me she had listened to this podcast with some guy. Had I ever heard of him? Pat Flynn. I said, yeah, I know him. And he had done an interview with someone who was selling on Amazon. She said, I have an idea of what to sell. And she pulled out this diffuser necklace. And I said, looks perfect. Let's do it. So we basically bought the domain that day. And I think we launched about 2 months later with products.
Was the person he had on, was it Bumblebee Linens and Steve Chow?
It wasn't Steve, actually. It was somebody else. But yeah, it was pretty funny because Pat actually spoke at our event a couple years ago. So when she came over and asked me if I knew Pat, I said, yeah, we kind of know each other.
Okay, so you start your e-commerce site, and this is kind of going back to what I said earlier is, so were you worried at all that, again, e-commerce is saturated and the jewelry online business is saturated, kind of how somebody might be thinking the same thing along blogging, along e-commerce. Were you worried about that at all?
So yes, and actually in e-commerce, I think there's a much bigger risk because you're actually investing capital to purchase product. We're not drop shipping, so we're actually buying product, having it imported from overseas, and then either storing it at our warehouse or at Amazon's warehouse. So the competition factor actually does play a little bit more of an important role in if you're actually going to get a physical product, because what you don't want is to be stuck with $10,000 to $20,000 worth of inventory that you can't offload because you're selling the exact same garlic press that everybody else is selling on Amazon or on your own web store. So the competition factor was actually a pretty big deal for us. But when we got started, there was only one other seller on Amazon and 2 other sellers that had web stores. So we felt like the market was definitely not saturated and that we could provide a better product, and we thought we could do something better.
Okay. So, I mean, we could go 2 hours on this podcast talking about exactly what happened. So some of the things I want to hit on with your e-commerce is, where were you buying your bulk from?
So we started off buying it on Etsy and then assembling it ourselves in my dining room. And then after we realized that that's not what we wanted to be spending our time on, we started importing them from Asia.
Already made?
Mostly already made, yeah.
Okay, so are you still then having to put things together, or is somebody else doing that for you?
So one of our things that we wanted to do was add charms and things like that to make it a little bit different than the competition. So we were still doing that because what we didn't want is a lot of these Asian manufacturers will sell to you and sell to everybody else the same exact product. And so we thought if we customized them in the States, it would keep the competition at bay. It doesn't really work that way. They'll just figure out a way when they want to do that to you. But so we did some stuff. Now we don't really do anything here.
So you start your e-commerce site. So where did you learn all of this? Like I told you, I learned from Pat Flynn, pro blogger, Darren Rouse about starting a blog. I learned from Amy Porterfield and David Siteman Garland on how to create a course. I mean, I feel like I'm nonstop learning. So if I was somebody who's thinking about going into the e-commerce business, where's a resource that I could go to learn?
So I think my two favorite resources would be Steve Chu. My wife quit her job. He has a podcast. He has a website. He actually has a free 6-day mini course that you can go through. And I really believe, so I took the mini course and I launched really only having taken the mini course, which is free. So I was able to get a product to market without paying for the course. Now I eventually did go through the course, and it's well worth the money, but you can launch without doing that. And then Scott Volker, the Amazing Seller podcast, he's really good for beginners. He talks a lot about like, how do you find a product? How do you get it to how do you import it or get it in the United States? And then how do you sell it? So those two would be, if you just wanted to like binge listen, I would do both of those.
Okay. So you said Scott is more for the, you're just getting started, beginning, and then maybe Steve's a little bit more, you've been around for weeks, months, you understand a little bit, and now you're ready to dive in a little bit further.
Or maybe you have an idea of what to sell. I think if you already sort of in the back of your mind say, hey, I've always wanted to do X, his podcast is probably a little more appropriate for that. But Scott is great if you are just like, hey, this seems interesting, but I have no idea where to start.
So I don't know Scott, but I can vouch for Steve. I do know Steve. I went and saw him about 2 weeks ago. And that guy is, I would say, he's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. And he is probably the funniest guy I've ever met without him trying to be funny, which, I mean, it literally cracks me up. That guy, we'll just say this. He loves to use the Chinese humor. He plays on that really hard, and I like it.
Yes, he does.
Yeah. So that's a little shout out to Steve. So we'll put links to both of those sites and podcasts in the show notes as well. So how long have you been doing e-commerce now?
We just hit 2 years last month.
Now this is going to blow people's minds right here, okay? Because this is cool, right? And I didn't ask you how much you made with your blog. I should have. We can come back to that. But I want to know, first of all, how much did you make, say, the first 2 to 3 months in e-commerce?
So the first month, I think we made maybe $1,000 or $2,000, and then we basically doubled. So we started in May, and we doubled through the summer, and then I think we were in 5 figures by probably August, September. 3
or 4 months in, you're in 5 figures.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now that's revenue. It's not profit.
Sure.
But yeah.
Sure, it's revenue. Yeah. Okay, so when did you go and publicly announce, right, that you are going to hit a certain goal? Tell me about this, because I'm huge on goal setting, and I'm big on putting goals on paper, looking at them every day, self-affirmations. But you took it a step further, and you told the public how much you were going to make in 30 days. Tell me about that process.
You were just saying a little bit ago how you love to read and learn and get as much information as possible. I also love to learn, but I am the child that when I was 5, I jumped in the pool not knowing how to swim, and I figured I would drown or learn how to swim. That is definitely my mindset with things, is I jump and then figure it out on my way down, and hopefully I get it before I crash. So we do this goal setting exercise at the end of every Digi, where we basically have people write down goals like, hey, what's your goal? You just came to this conference. Your mind is about, overflowing with information. Let's just talk about one thing you can do this week to transform your business. And then we sort of branch that out to one thing this month and then one thing for the year while we're doing it, because I know when you're in a group and like, who wants to get out a piece of paper and write? It's like annoying. And I'm one of these people who's like, I'm not filling this out. But we thought, well, hey, if we give people our answers up in front of everybody, that will encourage them to hopefully participate. And so just randomly, I said, well, my goal is to make $100,000 before the end of the year in 1 month. I think when I said that, we were probably making about $20,000 to $25,000 a month. So it was a pretty big goal to set in front of a bunch of people. And, it was our very first year in e-commerce. I had no idea what to expect. But once I said it out loud, that pretty much locked me into no matter what it took, I was hitting that goal.
Wow.
I might have taken them door to door. I mean, honestly, that's because for me, if I'm going to say something publicly and you're going to hold me accountable to it, you're going to bet that I'm going to reach that goal.
I love that. I absolutely love it, because public announcement like that, a public proclamation, that's so powerful. And I've had a little bit of that in my own business. I wasn't at a conference saying it, but I've mentioned things in front of friends and, thinking they forget about it. And then, 2 months later, like, hey, have you hit that number yet? And I'm like, wow, you were actually listening. I'm on my way now because now you're holding me accountable to it. So the next conference I go to, I think I'm just going to stand up on a box and scream out I call it my wildly important goal. So
you should.
Yeah, no. And I think everybody should. I think,
yeah.
So let me ask you this. People probably are like, I don't want to set a goal because what if I don't hit it?
Right.
What do you say to that?
Well, you're never going to hit it if you don't say it out loud. That's my opinion.
That's right.
Because the goal is going to keep changing in your mind, right? So if I would have thought to myself, I want to make $100,000 in December because it's the holidays. I think I can do it because, sales really increase in the holidays. But then, the holidays come and things get sucky and it's hard and I'm having issues. Then in my mind, I'm like, well, 90,000. Sorry for the dogs.
No, hey, this is a family-friendly podcast, so I would love to welcome your dogs on the show.
My kids are silent, but my dogs have not learned.
No worries.
So, you hit 90 and you're like, well, 90 is pretty good. I mean, who the heck does 90,000? Like you start justifying it in your mind, a lower goal. It's almost like when I know you're really big into fitness. And so, I had a trainer for a long time and man, if he said I was doing this many burpees or this many Supermans or whatever, I had to do them. But if I was doing it by myself, I would say like, oh, that's good. That's 13. I'm sweating, But when people are holding you accountable, it forces you to do it.
No, you're exactly right. So another takeaway for this episode is if you want to go above and beyond, if you want to set a goal that's you don't think is attainable, then go tell as many people as you can about it, right?
Yeah.
Because now you have to do it, right? Like you said, you were going to go door to door, right? You were going to do whatever it took. So I'm going to link to a blog post. I mentioned that earlier where she shares in depth what it took for her to get to that 100,000 in a month. And I mean, it is nothing short of extreme amounts of action, extreme amounts of hustle. And then just as things were going good, she kind of gets the rug pulled out from underneath. We talk about, I'll just mention this, the piggies.
Yes.
You will understand that if you want to read a little bit more, but you hit the $100,000. So let's just go back to this now. So how many minutes a month or a week are you putting in the Happy Housewife?
Probably less than an hour a month.
Less than an hour. And it generates income.
Yeah.
A substantial amount of income, something that's like a good amount of income?
Yeah, like definitely like a full-time job.
Okay. Wow. All right. So 10 minutes a month, an hour a month. And so the way I explain the blogging world to people, I was telling a buddy of mine, Toni, that he owns a landscape company. I said, can you imagine if you mowed this guy's lawn one time and then it just looked great? From this point forward, you never had to mow it again. And maybe you had to put in an hour's worth of work on all of your properties, right? All of your lawns once a month, and they would still generate the same amount of income and maybe even go up over time. And that's kind of how I feel like the blogging world is you kind of, you create it and it's digital, so it stays that way. And then you pivot and you go into something that's totally unique for a blogger is to go into a physical product and you're crushing it. So thank you so much for sharing those stories. That's very, very, very cool to hear somebody that's as transparent as you tell it like it is. You don't sugarcoat everything. And thank you for putting up with me on this podcast. So lastly, I was a guest on a fun little podcast called Avoid Being Hated a few months back. Where can we find that? Because that's your podcast.
Yeah, so you can find us at avoidbeinghated.com. You'll get show notes and you link to their podcast episodes. Yeah, I think we're on I think we're about where you are, right? I think we're about the same, might be a little bit.
We started right around the same time.
Yeah, so we're still going strong. We had Don't Be Hated by Your Pool Guy this week. And we have some good ones coming up. One of my favorites, you'll probably like it, Avoid Being Hated by an ER Nurse. So it's very, very in line with first responder type thing.
Very cool.
Things to not go to the ER for. So I'm sure you're well versed in those types of situations.
Absolutely, I am. So Avoid Being Hated, it's a podcast I listen to on a regular basis because it is the things that you're thinking in your head. There's now a podcast for it where they actually say those exact things you're thinking in your head. So very, very cool, Toni. All right. So little rapid fire questions I have for you. If there's any books that you would recommend to anybody getting started today with their blog, with their e-commerce store, with their business, with the next step, what would you recommend?
Probably my favorite book, if you're just getting started, is was it Jab, 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 Hook by Gary Vaynerchuk?
Yep. Jab, 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 right hook.
Yep. Great if you're getting started because most people get started in social media and they just think it's a megaphone and they're just blasting everybody. And he has a great perspective on how it should really be turned around.
Okay, very cool. We'll have links to that. Okay, the next question I have is, what is on your home screen of your phone?
Oh my gosh, a picture of my 2 girls in Jamaica.
The next one is, if you could go anywhere in the world for a week, where would you go?
Oh, I'd probably go back to Jamaica.
And lastly, you have $100 right now to do whatever you want with. What do you do with it?
Oh, I'd buy shoes.
Can you even buy shoes for $100 today?
Well, I'd shop a sale.
Okay. Maybe there's an e-commerce sale with...
I know how to get stuff cheap.
Alrighty, Toni. Hey, thank you so much for coming on the show. You have put up with me for a long time. You actually, when you were in Phoenix last, you actually went and did a Pinterest strategy with me for free. You wouldn't let me pay you, and you wouldn't even let me buy you coffee because you don't drink coffee. And you got a heart of gold. You're awesome. And I know that there's people listening to this right now going, wow, this is a housewife whose husband was overseas with 6 kids, homeschooling them. What's my excuse, right? What is my excuse? And look at where you've gone from in 2006 to, just 10 years later. You have a profitable blog that's running on its own with a little bit of effort. And then you have a crazy successful e-commerce site. So Toni, it is a pleasure to even know you.
Aw, thank you. It's been fun. You know what? We always talk about you behind your back, just so you know, that you're one of our favorite people because when you get advice from people, you take it and implement it. And I think that's actually probably good advice for anybody that's listening. If you're going to reach out for help, take the advice that people are giving you and investing in you because they're going to come back and invest in you even more. Same thing with money, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, you do kind of tease me about that. You say, wow, I can't believe you actually did that. I'm like, you told me to. Remember from Forrest Gump, because you told me to, drill sergeant? That's kind of how I am. So, all right, Toni, thank you so much for coming on the show. And maybe we'll have you back again when you hit your 7 to 8 figure e-commerce site.
All right. You count on it.
And just like that, we wrap up another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. Anything Toni and I talked about in the show can be found over in the show notes. So head on over to moneypeach.com/session45. That's moneypeach.com/session45. Special thanks to my producer, Steve Stewart, my assistant, Kayla Sloan. Without them, none of this would be possible. We'll see you guys next week, same time, same place, with another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. Boom, 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 boom.